Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to the final sixth session of Accelerating into Leadership. I am your host, Shoaib Mahmood, and today I'll be joined by a very special person, very esteemed guest of ours. It's actually the first time he's delivering something for Neither Trust, and he goes by the name of Karim Murcia. Before I go into a formal introduction, I want to tell you about how I actually met Brother Karim. You may remember Marwan Al-Falah, who led one of the sessions, actually referring to Karim as somebody who sets a vision. And Marwan, when he mentored me, actually said the same thing as well. So when I left that particular school, I attended, I was part of the same organization that Karim worked for as well. It's a multi-academy trust. And they had a joint continuing professional development day. And Karim was a deputy principal at that particular academy. And he was leading the session, and I later found him in the prayer room, and I went up to him. I said, is your name Karim? And he was like, yeah, I led the session. Of course it's Karim. So I said, do you know a guy called Marwan Al-Falah? He was like, yeah. I just said to him, just wait right there, stop. So I took my phone and I took this selfie back in 2014 and I WhatsApped it straight to Marwan, and Marwan just said, what's it with you hugging all deputy head teachers? I've got this thing about hugging people. But yeah, so that's how I met Brother Karim, and mashallah, since then, got to speak to him now and again. So that's enough of me giving you the introduction, Brother Karim. I was going to say, assalamu alaikum to you, and welcome to this final session.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah khairan, Mushaib, for the lovely introduction. Thank you.
Well, I'm not quite finished yet, Brother Karim. I'm hoping you share your screen so I can speak about some of your accomplishments to date.
Okay, hopefully it's going to share.
Inshallah. So, Brother Karim, yeah, I can see it. Just getting it loaded up on the screen to PowerPoint view. Just waiting for it to go widescreen. So, as I was saying, the Art of Delegation is our final session, and this session is going to be quite pertinent to a lot of us because this can be seen as a very challenging topic. Is it loaded up on your screen, Brother Karim?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Because at the moment it's just showing me the slide, but not in PowerPoint view.
Okay.
Not in slideshow view. It's got the little circly thing wandering around. Bismillah. Just in the meantime, let's just have a look at the participations. It's slowly starting to grow, so that's good, mashallah. And just a reminder as well that a lot of this, all of these sessions will be shared with you alongside the resources. We'll be emailing them to you, and not forgetting as well that there is a form that we'll be sending to you guys as well. Brother Karim, it's now showing me the main slide with the following slide on the right-hand side.
I think it's because I had my screen extended. So
if you go to display settings.
Hopefully now I'll stop that.
Okay, yeah, so as I was saying, there will be an email that will follow with this that will ask you to give feedback on all the sessions. Brother Karim, if you press on display settings, yeah, and hopefully we can just duplicate slideshow. Yeah, there we go. All right, so anyways, let's start the session. Art of Delegation. If you hit the next slide for me, please, Brother Karim, so I can introduce you formally. So, Brother Karim is the founding principal of Eden Girls for School. He set it up in its inception in 2015, and under his leadership, the school went on to be judged as outstanding by Ofsted in May 2018. Brother Karim was quite instrumental in putting this team together and helping the school on its journey to becoming outstanding. In 2019, he was appointed as principal and CEO of the National School for Boys Al-Barsha, and as many of you would know, this academy trust called GEMS, one of the most largest academy trusts across the Middle East, if not the world. So Brother Karim, I now pass the floor to you.
Jazakallah khairan, Shoaib. Thank you again for the lovely introduction. It's my real pleasure to be able to talk to everyone at Need a Trust for the first time today, and hopefully looking forward to exploring some of the ideas around delegation with everyone. So I think it's really important to start any session being really clear about what you mean about the terms. And I think especially for this session, because delegation, I think it's got some connotations, and it certainly has some connotations for me. So I wonder, Brother Shoaib, if it's an okay start, if we could just ask participants to note some of their definitions of delegation in the comment box.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So go ahead, everyone. If you could follow the proceedings that Brother Karim has said, if you could comment on what is your definition of delegation. Let's see what comes through. Keep an eye on the chat.
Brother Shoaib, can I ask you first of all, what would be your? You said I could put you on the spot.
Oh man, I should not have said that.
Yeah. So what's your definition of delegation?
Okay. So my definition of delegation would be, putting it simply, sharing roles, sharing tasks with members in your team, and then monitoring how they are progressing with these tasks. And while I'm saying that, I'm getting a lot of comments in the box as well. Would you like me to read some of them out to you?
Yeah, I would love that. But before that, could I just ask you one final question?
Go ahead.
For you, is delegation something positive, negative, or neutral?
I believe I'd say it's neutral, because I do feel hesitant about letting the shackles go and, parting with those responsibilities myself. But sometimes it has been a positive experience as well, especially when the person who you delegate to produces some remarkable things.
I'm thinking more the other way. If you feel you've been delegated to, do you feel, is that typically a positive, negative, or neutral feeling?
I believe it depends who it comes from. So if it's given to me by my principal or someone else who's senior to me, I'll take that as as this person trusts me to do something. Whereas if it's the other way, it will be kind of obviously can be quite negative if someone sort of undermines your seniority in an organization.
Well, what are some of the definitions that we've had?
Excellent. Okay, I was hoping you go into that. Sharing workload by Brother Mustafa. Fareed says giving tasks for colleagues to complete. Kashif says assigning tasks. Aisha from Istanbul. Hosh Kaldinez, sharing out jobs that need to be done. Mustafa says empowering others. Eshan says provide realistic tasks based on each person's skill set. Sadaf says entrust a task to a team member. Marwan says, Brother Marwan, choosing who does what. Assigning tasks to individuals in your team, said by Nagina. Dividing and allocate tasks to others, Hasina. Amal says sharing work. Kashif, sharing communal. And pretty much it's similar to what we've been said already. Positive beyond the limit. Go ahead.
So that's really interesting to me, that the majority are either positive, like empowering and entrusting, and others are a bit more neutral, like choosing, assigning, sort of sharing.
Yep, correct.
Okay, so the aims of this session are for us to collectively explore and understand the principles of effective delegation, and to be aware of the most common mistakes related to delegation. So that's what we really want to achieve at the end of this session. Be clear about what works well and what we really want to avoid as leaders. And why do we want this? Well, let's think about the benefits of delegation. And the reason I started with that first activity is because I really don't often think about delegation as a leader. It's not a term I use a lot, and it's not really an idea or a concept that I think about a lot. I do think more about distributing leadership. So for me, benefits of delegation, I really like the verbs used, empowering and trusting, or the idea of distributing leadership, whatever we want to call it. The benefits are reducing the stress because we're managing our workload, improving our time management, increasing the trust through the team, having a sense of achievement, and particularly a shared sense of achievement, and increased productivity and efficiency, both for the individual and for the team. So those are the benefits, and that's why we're here. We want to explore delegation together, and we want to be good at it because of these benefits that it could bring us and bring the members of our team. Okay, so I want to start with a definition of leadership, because if we're saying that delegation is an important part of leadership, we can't divorce it from the act of leadership itself. And so this is my simple definition of leadership, because I think it's the most succinct, and it captures the two real essential elements of leadership. And that is to get a team, or to mobilize a team to achieve a goal. And that really is leadership. If you're just mobilizing a team and you lose sight of the goal, well, then you're really just having a party. That's just a group of people together. If you just want to achieve a goal, well, then you might be a painter or an inventor, but you're not necessarily a leader. So when you've got the two elements of this, mobilizing a team and achieving a goal, that's leadership. And why I think that links directly to delegation is because that keeping that simple definition in mind when you're delegating or trusting is really important, because those two elements, especially the first part, a team, I think are going to take away a lot of the problems that we're going to find with delegation. So I really believe that fundamental to delegation, before you even start thinking about delegating, if your focus is, if you are focused all the time on building a team, a strong team, a positive team, and in order to do that, you're making sure that everyone has very clear roles and responsibilities, then you're going to find it much easier to achieve good delegation, because if you're going to achieve your goals, then the team are going to have to agree that there's going to need to be some sharing of tasks. And so mobilizing a team in order to achieve a goal, I think is the fundamental building block of effective delegation. So then if we then look at the actual act itself of delegation, you've got essentially two elements then. It's the team member that you're delegating the task to, and then the task itself. So it's really important to consider those two parts, the members of the team and the task itself, because each of those need to be considered in what you delegate, how you delegate. So if we start first of all with the team and its roles and responsibilities. So although this doesn't directly link to delegation in terms of an act, sharing out tasks, I think time invested at this stage is going to really reap dividends later on when you want to delegate. So time invested in establishing clear roles and responsibilities means that colleagues are going to be really clear about what they need to do. And so if the team's vision, priority, roles and responsibilities are clear, then the delegation is going to become a much simpler task. So next activity, next question for participants to think about. In your middle leadership role, what tasks and responsibilities do you need to delegate as opposed to those that you would retain? So, for example, if you are a head of faculty in a secondary school, or what would you not ask your team members to do? Or which tasks would you need to delegate? If you are a phase leader in a primary school, the same. If we can just try to get a clear sense of some of the tasks and responsibilities, first of all, that we need to delegate, then we're going to be in a good position to start thinking about how we're going to delegate. Brother Shoaib, are we starting to get some examples in?
Yeah, we've got one that's messaged privately by Sister Sidra, and she said training of staff. You wouldn't ask some of your colleagues under you to go and train some members of staff unless they were experts in that. Just waiting for a few more responses to come through.
So as a head of faculty previously yourself, Brother Shoaib, what were the tasks, what were the main tasks that you would have to delegate to team members?
If I think back again to my role as a head of faculty, I think it was more or less around planning around the subject area. So writing perhaps a scheme of work, sharing that kind of responsibility.
Dividing up responsibility for schemes of work.
Correct, yeah. So there's a program of study, and obviously it's unit based, and you would like all your team members to contribute towards it, rather than taking on that burden and ownership myself. I could do it very easily, but then obviously it's going to be a huge task to plan a whole year of study. Whereas if you can apportion it and delegate it to your staff members, then that would be even more enhanced, better.
So I was talking to one of our primary middle leaders today, and she said that one of the big things was about resource creation. So this is a key stage 1 phase leader. Okay. And for key stage 1 teachers, it's a lot about tangible resources and really giving young children a chance to play and experience the learning using tangible, real resources. And she said that that's something which she can sometimes find challenging to delegate. Do we have examples from participants?
Yes, we do. We've got Mina saying, I will try to give the task as per the area of interest and expertise. Najina says, lesson resources for everyone else. Mustafa says, data collection and contribution. I'm not quite sure how that fits in. Ehsan says, give greater control over schemes of work gradually depending on skill and experience of staff. And Sister Simra says, will provide conflict-free or conflict-manageable environment. I'm not quite sure if that answers the question.
Okay. So we're starting to get a bit of a sense of what we might want to delegate as middle leaders. So if we're clear then as a middle leader that either, as you're saying, Brother Shoaib, that schemes of work, we want to delegate schemes of work because I'm a head of faculty in a secondary school, and there are 7 different years, and actually there are 3 subjects in my faculty, and I couldn't possibly create all of those schemes of work. And so I want to delegate a portion of those schemes of work to be completed by members of my team. And there will be other activities as a head of faculty, as a middle leader, that we wouldn't want to delegate because of our experience or our role, then we are in the best position to complete those tasks, or we may be the only member of the team who actually knows how to complete that task. So, for example, a middle leader may often, should really often, be completing self-evaluations and strategic development plans for their particular area of responsibility. Now, team members would feed into that, but they wouldn't be given responsibility for completing those plans or completing those evaluations. So there will be tasks that we want to delegate, and there'll be other tasks that we wouldn't be able to delegate. So then we think about the members of our team and who we have in our team that we have to delegate these tasks to. So we might have a beginning teacher in our team. We might have a newly qualified teacher. In our team, we may have an outstanding teacher. We might have a colleague who's very experienced, but might be a bit cynical. We might have a teacher who's underperforming. We may have a member of our team who shares a formal responsibility with us as a second in charge. So we would need to think about what types of activities, responsibilities we delegate to them, and perhaps how we delegate to them. And then there's yourself as the middle leader and thinking about how you delegate. So with each of those different profiles of colleagues in your team, you would want to be thinking, you'd be taking a different approach to delegation, and you would be delegating different things to them, and you may not delegate, you might choose not to delegate responsibilities or tasks to them. So for example, a newly qualified teacher in your team, particularly if you find in the first phase of their career, they're struggling to get their head around teaching, or they're struggling with the new level of responsibility workload, then clearly you wouldn't be delegating to them. Whereas the outstanding teacher, obviously you're going to have a much broader range of activities and responsibilities that you might be able to delegate them to them. Then there's a next element, I think, to when we consider our teams, which is considering their the different personalities and styles, learning styles that we have in our teams. So, for example, within our team, we might have a character, a personality who's very reflective, who's a real thinker. We might have someone very creative. Okay, we might have someone very analytical, and we might have colleagues who are real doers. As soon as we talk about something, they're straight off with it, and they get straight into the task and they want to complete it. Now, it's really important that we consider different personalities and different styles in delegation, because that's going to determine a lot of the success that we have when we're delegating. So, for example, if there's something that comes up quickly that needs to be done tomorrow, and is going to require real quickness of thought to get it set up and to execute it, then if you've got a member of your team who's very reflective, then that would be the exact wrong person to delegate to, because that colleague is going to need a lot more time to get their head around an activity, and they would be much more likely to get stressed when delegating that type of activity to them. On the other end of the spectrum, if you need some proofreading of your self-evaluation as a middle leader before you submit it to your head teacher, and you really want to make sure that you've considered the different elements of your phase or your subject, then you wouldn't want to give it to the colleague who's the doer, okay? Because that's not going to be their preferred learning style. That's not going to be their strength to give it to. So as the colleague was saying in the chat box, in the same way that you think about people's interests, you think about their strengths and their personalities and their styles when delegating tasks and responsibilities. So if we can then just have a think about this hypothetical task that you might get autumn term, and the senior leadership team have decided they want to do a global day. Okay, you can see that I work in Dubai now. This is the kind of thing that we do. We might plan a global day. Okay, and for the global day, either your phase, your key stage 2 phase, or your subject, your humanities subject, are going to have a room or a stall. If participants can have a think about what types of activities they might delegate to our different profile of teacher. So if you start to think about, okay, we're going to have a global day. We need a stall. We need to create a display board. We need to create some documentation that provides some information either for students or parents. We need to create some activities for students to do. What would your knowledge of the different personalities in your team, how would that help you to delegate? And what types of activities would you delegate to the different profiles of members of your team. So you might think about these personality traits, or you might think about the profiles that we had on the previous screen, the outstanding teacher, the experienced, the perhaps cynical teacher, the NQT. What would be the different activities that you might delegate to the different profiles of colleagues? Shoaib, does that make sense?
It does. It makes absolute sense. And we've already got some colleagues commenting. So we've got Sister Munira says, creative to take charge of store displays. Planning for the reflective one. Thamina says displays and props, etc. by creative doers. Creative person to develop activities and displays. I agree with the Sister Hasina there. Sadaf, planning activities to reflect the thinker. And I just want to say, before we proceed further, this actually got me going as well. And I had to note this down in my little notebook and just think about how would I delegate these kind of tasks. But this is quite an interesting activity that you put together, Brother Karim.
Yeah, and well, this is my experience. So and as you go through your career, you get your fingers burnt on many occasions, Brother Shoaib. And so there are many times where I have delegated tasks without really considering the different profiles of members of my team, and then sometimes be frustrated if the reflective colleague is struggling because he hasn't had enough time to get his head around it, or if the doer just rushes into doing something and really I would have wanted them to spend a bit more time preparing and considering. So this is really fundamental. If we go, it's not just, okay, I've got 10 tasks and so I need to just divvy them up and now everyone's got 2 tasks, and that's fair, because as the colleague said, different interests, different strengths, different experiences are all going to feed into what we decide to delegate and how we decide to delegate.
Yeah, and I must admit, I got quite stuck with the analyst part, but we've just got a comment from Brother Mustafa who said, the analyst will be the one to complete evaluation after the event. And we've got Aisha Said who said, pre-event tasks and post-event review may be outlined in a document. So some very heavy thinking going on there.
Yeah, and I mean, in the context I work currently, I have a colleague who's incredibly experienced, very, very strong senior leader, but she knows where she doesn't have strengths. So she knows that she's not good with data. She knows that she's not strong with IT, but she's got a member of her team who fills in those gaps perfectly. Mm-hmm. So she's able to delegate everything data related, everything IT related, and they complement each other beautifully. And so that these are important considerations.
Excellent. Okay.
So then linked to this, then we start to develop our thinking and our understanding about the different styles and approaches we take when we have different colleagues. So this is a model from a book called Leadership and the 1 minute manager, excuse me. And what we have here is a matrix which where we're thinking about to what extent we need to direct and to what extent we need to support. And so you can see here from this visual that in stage 1, this is where a colleague, for various reasons, usually because of inexperience, okay, but it needs clear direction. They need very clear direction. And according to this model then, when you're starting to move towards having a lower level of direction and starting to be able to be you're still supporting more. Now you're supporting more. Then you move into a coaching phase. So then here you have colleagues where you're coaching them. You're not having to direct every single task, but you're starting to be able to give more feedback, asking them more critical questioning. Then you move into a phase where there's less direction, but you're still providing support. still providing high support. So that's a supportive phase of leadership. And then according to this model, you move into the fourth stage, where a colleague has become far more competent, more experienced, and so there's that trust, and then you're able to delegate more. So you move into a delegating phase. And then the model helps the leader to understand where his or her team members are in their development. And then, as we were doing previously, you're adjusting your leadership style according to the needs of the members of your team. So this is the same matrix, but with a bit more text to explain what we have here. So again, if we start down in stage 1, colleagues are new to role. They might have recently joined an organization or been promoted. They require lots of clear direction. They're generally enthusiastic. And then in stage 2, perhaps a bit more experience. They still require lots of direction. They also require more coaching and support. Okay, their enthusiasm might dip as they start to realize the challenges they're going to face. Then we move into this stage here in terms of supporting. They know the job, so they don't require too much direction, but they still require plenty of support. So this is where your checking of the work, your modeling and structuring will still be there, but you're not having to direct as much. And then in this final stage, which is the delegation stage, they know the job. If the leader, the boss is away, then they can carry on perfectly well. They require low direction, little support. They're competent and experienced, and they should be preparing for promotion. So that's this situational leadership model. Now, the next idea I want to talk about in terms of delegation, and I think this is something which I find crucially important always, is planning ahead. Okay, when you're planning ahead and you're wanting to delegate, then you're so much more likely to achieve effective delegation because you're building in the time that you need to discuss issues, address concerns, and then giving the colleagues time to prepare, work on the particular task or responsibility, and then that phase of, as a leader, your quality assurance. And I think the worst kind of delegation is where delegation is last minute, because then that's when you're going to get into all kinds of problems, and that's going to lead to lots of issues in the team. But if we were to stop and think about what challenges what are the challenges we have when we're wanting to delegate? What are the most common frustrations or barriers to effective delegation? I think in most circumstances, the fundamental issue is that we're worried that colleagues are going to say that that's not my job. That's not my job to do. But by planning ahead, then you're able to do all the things that you're going to need to do, and you've got time factored in to resolve any of the issues. So, for example, it's not my job. Well, we've already spoken about setting up clear roles and responsibilities in the team. And so we would have an opportunity to revisit those roles and responsibilities, and if we need to, we can review them. Okay, so if a colleague has a point to say, well, look at my roles and responsibilities, it doesn't say anything here in my roles and responsibilities about me planning schemes of work. I'm a teacher, and I can't see anything where it says about, it's my responsibility to plan schemes of work. Well, then we have an opportunity, because we've got time to go back and review that and address that. If a colleague were to say, well, I've never done this before, and I don't know where to start, but then there's an opportunity for us to model and to provide a structure. And if I can give you, Brother Shoaib, an example from my own leadership recently, and it's a funny little example, but it was an example that was causing me some stress. So as the principal of my school, I invest time into trying to get clarity on roles and responsibilities for my team. So I've got a head of primary, assistant head of primary, head of secondary, assistant head of secondary, head of inclusion, head of Ministry of Education subjects is something we have here in UAE. So lots of responsibilities. And then sometimes funny little things will come up when you just think, well, even with all that work on roles and responsibility, I can't think who this should go to. Am I going to end up having to plan all this and do all this? So we've been planning for a few weeks now a series of activities in relation to Father's Day. Okay, so Sunday is Father's Day, and I couldn't think for the life of me who was going to pick it up. Is it going to be the head of primary, the head of secondary? Why should it be one of them? And I came up with a rationale that it was going to be our head of inclusion. And it was going to be our head of inclusion, according to my rationale, because she had been at the school the longest. She works very closely with some of our most needy and vulnerable families, and she's also leaving this year. And I thought it was a fitting opportunity for her to really get in touch with the community through this activity. So that's a rationale. And you can make an argument for lots of different reasons, but it was a rationale. Now, she could easily have come back to me and said, I'm the head of inclusion, I'm not going to plan a whole series of Father's Day activities. But she was, thankfully, quite convinced by that rationale. But what was important is that I started that conversation a month ago, because I knew that it wasn't a clear-cut delegation, and I knew that it's something that she's never done before, and so I knew that we would need to have some time to discuss it, to work it out, to come up with some models and scaffolds, and so that was a silly little example of a delegation stress that I was having, which planning ahead of time and building in enough time to deal with any issues was really important. Now, thankfully, we haven't ended up having many issues, but still, it was a thought process that I went through, that planning ahead. So I do think that it's a really fundamental part to delegation, planning ahead. So far, we've talked about, with effective delegation, we've said, the importance of investing time in clarifying roles and responsibilities, considering our team member profiles and personalities when we're delegating, considering the leadership style that needs to be employed because of that analysis that we've done of our team member profiles and personalities, and planning ahead. This is my mini plenary, Brother Shoaib.
MashaAllah, very good.
Go on.
Delegation, is it something that you can, I suppose, acquire, learn, or is it something that is just deep-rooted within inside you to be able to delegate? Well,
I mean, my honest answer is I really don't think much about, personally, as a leader, it's not something I think about a lot. Okay. Because what I think more about is clarifying roles and responsibilities. The team members that I have, their strengths, their profiles, their personalities, their interests, the style that I need to use when I approach them and work with them, and the goal itself. So, if I have a head of primary and our goal is to have an outstanding primary phase, then we are going to need to do these 20, 50 things in order to get there, and it's really a non-negotiable.
Sure.
So in terms of like delegation as an act itself, to me, it's not something I think about directly. Is something that is you end up doing it just because it has to be done, because you've got to achieve the goals.
Sure. Okay, interesting.
So if we could just stop and consider these four things for a second. So this is where we've got to so far. Roles and responsibilities, considering the members of our team, considering our style in relation to our the profiles and personalities of our team, and the importance of planning ahead. So then if we then just take what we've considered and explored so far, and then we just think about this little task, which is how are we going to delegate this one to our team? There's a noise outside so we're having a meeting. We're in a leadership team meeting, me and Brother Shoaib, leadership team meeting, and there's a noise outside in the corridors bothering us. How are we going to delegate this one? Who are we going to delegate it to? How will you delegate this to one of your team members?
Okay.
And just, if we can invite participants just to
yep.
jot any ideas down.
Let's get everyone to throw in some comments and tell us. So our sister Aisha says, the person that's closest to the door with a smiley face.
Nice one.
Sadaf says, lead by example. So do it yourself. But we're talking about delegation here. How do you delegate that to somebody else? Okay, let's see what else.
So far we've had who's closest to the door, and do it yourself.
Yep.
Okay. Any others?
Find out what the noise is. Mustafa says, analyze to find out what the noise is. Fareed said, can someone go and deal with that? So that's what you'd say. Can someone go and deal with that?
Can someone go and deal with that? Yeah. I'm interested in your one, Brother Shoaib.
My one, I would just say, can you get that, please? Can you go and deal with that?
Do you know, my thought on this one is that in the same way that different colleagues are going to require different approaches, then the different situation, the specific situation is going to determine what I would do here. So, for example, if we were in a meeting and I was in the middle of explaining something, that I consider to be quite critical, and in the flow of explaining that, and it would really break the flow of the meeting for us to lose where we were.
Sure.
Then I would ask a colleague who I thought may not miss so much by leaving the meeting for a short time. I might ask them to go and have a look at what's going on, or the colleague closest to the door. But if we were just sitting around waiting for the start of the meeting, then I would see no reason to ask someone else to do it, and I would prefer to go and see what was going on myself. So I can sympathise with the closest to the door and with the do-it-yourself response.
Okay. We've also got a response from Zainab saying, would you mind and see what is happening out there? Mustafa says to think about what will stop it from happening in the future. And then Aisha's come back and said, I wouldn't wait for being delegated. I would, as a member of staff, would get up and see what's happening myself.
Very, very encouraging. Okay, so I think one of those responses, or some of those responses remind me of, though, is the importance of communication style. That when I was talking to one of our middle leaders about this session, and her response was, it's not the delegation, it's the way it's communicated. So I think in the same way with planning ahead, I do believe that the style, the tone, and the way that we communicate is as important as the message and the task itself. Okay, so the next element in our exploration of delegation is about explaining the reasons. So really important, in the same way that we talked about a team needs to have clear roles and responsibilities and needs to have a clear goal. Why is this task being delegated specifically to that person or this group of people? So being really clear about why something is being delegated. What is its importance and relevance? And where does it fit in the overall scheme of things? And I think there's a lot of ground that can be gained in this part of our thinking about delegation. In the same way we talk about the way we communicate, it makes a difference. The reasons that we give make a big difference too. Right? So are we delegating these tasks just because there are 10 schemes of work, they all need to be planned, and it's only fair, I shouldn't lose my whole summer holidays doing them, and so 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and now we've all got an equal amount, and that's fair. Well, they can come back to me and say, well, you're getting paid more than me, you're a middle leader, you have a TLR. Okay, I'll do 4 and you can each do 3, and now it's fair. But is it, or is it about, we want to make sure that we have consistently outstanding provision, because we want to make sure that our students get the very best possible learning experience and outcomes, because they deserve it, because we're responsible for their education. As Muslims, it's an amana, that we've been entrusted with this responsibility. And so we absolutely, it's our duty to make sure that this work is of the highest possible standard, and the only way we're going to do that is by dividing it and working on it together and getting that collaboration and synergy. Yeah, so I think you can delegate exactly the same task, but you can either delegate it just as a kind of mechanical process, or you can really deeply explore the compelling reasons for doing it, and that's going to make a big difference. Yeah. So with my recent delegation challenge, I could have said to my head of inclusion, everyone else's workload is full, and I really need you to pick up Father's Day, and she would have had to do it. But I genuinely meant the reasons that I had about her role as head of inclusion, her work with our vulnerable families, the fact that she's leaving the school and it's her opportunity to give something back to the community before she goes. It was very genuine, and I think it really struck a chord with her. And so just taking time to think about the reasons and how we communicate the reasons. And for example, why is it important? Why is it important that we've got a good scheme of work of year 8? Is it because SLT, when they scrutinize, we don't get into trouble, or is it because our year 8s must be set up brilliantly for Key Stage 4, because they're from a deprived background in London, and getting the best possible grade is going to improve their life chances. And it might mean some immeasurable things for their lives. So what's its important relevance? How does it fit into a bigger scheme of things? So I know I don't want that to sound overly profound, but I think there's a lot of ground that can be gained in how we explain the reasons. You take a little bit more time to explain the purpose of something and the rationale for it, it's going to go a lot further.
Brother Karim, we've got a question here from Sister Kubra, who's asked, what if they state that it isn't fair? What could you say to them?
If they say it's not fair?
Correct.
So if a colleague's response is, it's not my job, it's not fair.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think there's two things that my response to that. Firstly, I think it's really important that we have open conversations, and I wouldn't take that as a challenge. I would go into that conversation wanting to explore with the colleague their thinking and try to persuade them of a different way of seeing it. So they say, I'm a teacher. Let's say, for example, I'm a year 4 teacher. I only get paid as a main scale teacher. I'm not paid for any additional responsibilities, and therefore I don't see why I should have to do it. So I would return to the vision and priorities of what we have as a team. So the vision and priorities would be, okay, well, we want to be the very best possible key stage 2. We want to have outstanding teaching. We want to have outstanding outcomes. And in order to do that, then we need to have fantastic schemes of work and resources. And in order for us to have fantastic schemes of work and resources, then we're going to need to, as I say, collaborate, have synergy, and learn from each other to make sure we have the best possible resources and outcomes. So I would appeal to the colleague through that by revisiting our vision, our priorities, our roles and responsibilities. That's what I do. Then I think the other thing I would say is that you also have to be realistic, and that as much as you do that, there will we work with a whole spectrum of people, and there may be people that will still not see that. So I think that there are some tactical, pragmatic things that you can do. Like, for example, if you're in a team, and if you go back to your profile of the team, in your team, let's just say for argument's sake, in your team, you've got an enthusiastic doer, and you've got an NQT, and you've got the experienced, cynical colleague who you're worried might say, it's not fair, I'm not going to do it. So the other tactical, pragmatic approach that you have is that you create an alliance, and you gain leverage before you take it to that experienced, cynical colleague. So, for example, if I knew that that's a likely response from a colleague, I wouldn't, in a meeting, approach it for the first time. So let's say, for example, we've got next term schemes of work to prepare. And I know that there's this colleague in here, and I know in the meeting, in the middle leadership, in my team meeting, if I raise that, she's going to shoot it down, or he's going to shoot it down straight away. So tactically, pragmatically, the way you approach that would be to create an alliance and to gain some momentum before you go into the meeting. So if you've already had a conversation with your enthusiastic doer, and he or she's on board, you've had a conversation with your NQT, and he or she doesn't know any different, they're on board. Now you've gone to the meeting, and you say, oh yeah, and when we talked about schemes of work, I just want to make sure everyone's okay with the fact that we're planning next term schemes of work in the next few weeks. And you've already got a 75% alliance that is going to create momentum that will make it less likely for that experienced, cynical colleague to react in that way. Mm-hmm. Then I'd also say that listening to that colleague and understanding some of the reasons. So it may be that, for example, let's just say for argument's sake, it may be childcare that's a barrier for them, or it may be that they've never planned a scheme of work and they don't know what to do. So there's things that you might be able to address there. And then finally, we don't live in an ideal world, and sometimes in spite of doing all those things, you still might not get buy-in from certain colleagues. Mm-hmm. And that's where you've got performance management, and you've got senior leaders that can help you. So that would be the approaches I would take to that.
Interesting. It's very insightful to that particular issue that people will face. It's really good for you to mention that people can be, sort of looked at through their performance management targets as well, just to bring them more aligned into what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, because let's be, we live in the real world. There are colleagues who will buy into your vision, priorities, roles, responsibilities, and there are other colleagues who won't. And that's why we've got processes like performance management. We've got processes like capability and disciplinary. These are other sides of leadership which are important as well. That we don't live in a utopia, and not everyone is going to buy in 100% of the time. Absolutely. Okay, so just to finish off then, the final aspect of effective delegation that I just wanted to touch on was the importance, and this is again very fundamental, of modeling and scaffolding. And in my experience of issues with delegation, the main issue is that colleagues don't know where to start. They may never have done the task before, and so by making sure that you get things rolling with them, holding hands for the first phase, doing the first couple with them, doing the first couple for them, and then doing the next couple with them, you create momentum through that. You provide structures and scaffolds. So in my school in Slough, a lot of the time when middle leaders would work on things like self-evaluation and strategic planning, we would provide the templates for them that would really help to structure the activity, so that there's a huge difference between asking someone, create me a resource on X, than create me a resource on X, and here's a PowerPoint, and I've created the 10 different phases that I wanted to have, and can you please help me to shape these parts which I really need your input into. Okay, so that, providing the structures and scaffold, assessing colleagues' ability and training needs, and considering the resources required. So this is a really important fundamental part of modeling and scaffolding. So we said that we would touch on, Brother Shoaib, some of the potential pitfalls of delegation. So some of the things we've been worried about, not wanting to hurt someone's feelings, that feeling that we can always do a better job ourselves, but that's going to create bottlenecks in the work, worried similarly that people would muck things up, I'm going to end up having to do it anyway. Now, with this, I would say these are really dangerous pitfalls for us to fall into, because I can do a better job myself. They're going to muck it up. I'm going to have to take charge anyway. We're not going to empower. If we go back to our first definition and some of those fantastic verbs that colleagues were using, empowering, entrusting, people are going to have to make some mistakes. People are going to have to make some mistakes along the way, and we're going to have to allow people to make mistakes, and to give them space to create, and to create that environment where it's okay to make mistakes as you learn. Okay, so that's I think really important, and we recognise that people don't always have the confidence to delegate. Okay, we also might not know the difference between delegating and training. We might provide only vague instructions. That's where that importance of scaffolding and modeling comes in. We might end up picking the wrong person to complete a task or to give a responsibility to. We might be guilty of delegating a task and not monitoring it. That's a very common one. We might have done all the things that we've talked about, and then just forget about it and say, well, I've delegated it now. And that's where we're going to get into problems too. So we've got to keep an eye on things. We've got to keep having check-ins and making sure that people are on track with things, and giving feedback and having an input, because also it values the task that you've given them. If we just delegate and then we forget about it, what we're really saying is, I just wanted to get it off my list of things to do, and it's not something that has real value. So even if we're not that concerned, we're going to be weakening our relationship with the colleague, because they will feel that, oh, we've just delegated something to get it off our to-do list. So that's really important. And then critically, constantly praising and thanking and appreciating, and one of the worst things that people could ever do is delegate and then take reward and credit for something that someone else has done for us. So there, Brother Shoaib, these are the six steps of effective delegation that we've explored today. So those were our objectives: to explore effective delegation and to think about some of the pitfalls. We're a little bit rushed at the end. I'm happy to take any questions, and if we've run out of time and we can't, then I've left my my contact details there, Brother Shoaib, my email, and also my school's Twitter account, so colleagues can see what we're up to over here in Dubai.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair for that, Brother Karim. I think it's dead on 6 o'clock here in the UK, so mashallah, how many hours are you in front of us in Dubai?
We are three ahead. It's 9 o'clock here.
Mashallah, mashallah. So yeah, you've done really well to stick to the timing, and I think that was quite a befitting way to conclude these sessions on accelerating into leadership. And I think you've provided the platform for everyone to think about how to bring the team together, which was pretty much the foundation and beginning part of the course. Allowing colleagues to reflect again in terms of getting to know your team, knowing the strengths and areas of development, and then choosing when it's the right time to sort of plan ahead. And I think it's very important that colleagues here reflect upon their team and often analyze themselves what they need to do to improve themselves too in order to delegate effectively. We do have a few questions, Brother Karim, that I'd like to...
I'm happy to say them. Okay, I'm happy to say them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I was going to also say as well, if anyone would like to ask you a question by unmuting their mic, we can also accommodate that as well. But for now, I've got a question ready to go. It's from Hasina Haq, who asks, it's good to allocate tasks to people's strengths. However, isn't it our responsibility to allow for growth and make people develop their skills in other areas and take them out of their comfort zone? Otherwise, they won't get better at it.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I 100% agree with that. How are colleagues not going to be? How are we going to develop colleagues if we don't give them a chance to work outside of their comfort zone? So, like anything, khairul umuri awsatuha, the best of actions are the balance in the middle. So, most of the time, if we're pressured for time, then we're going to be thinking along the lines of who's best suited to this task. But for sure, an important part of leadership is empowering and developing. And if we don't give colleagues a chance to develop outside their comfort zone, then we're not going to create the type of environment where colleagues feel empowered, they're developing and they're growing professionally. So I would 100% agree that you need to have a balance. You push for time, so you allocate tasks to those best suited, but you also want to have a plan for colleagues' growth and succession planning, and how you can be identifying areas for development and helping them grow in those areas.
Inshallah, that's pretty spot on. We've also got a suggestion from Aisha Saeed, who says, task management softwares like those offered by Microsoft or Orange Scrum can be helpful in efficiency. So I've never come across anything like that before. Have you, by any chance?
I haven't, but I'm keen to look into it.
Okay, lovely. A lot of people are saying Jazakallah khair, and they're saying this was a great session. Thank you, Brother Karim. And Marwan says, thank you, Karim. Wish I had a session like this before I entered into middle leadership. So I think Brother Marwan has given you some kudos there, and amazing training again. So mashallah, some excellent feedback. Alhamdulillah. Any final remarks from yourself, Brother Karim?
Yeah, I do have one, because I think it's an important health warning on delegation, and something which I think is important to share. Particularly, I believe most colleagues are from Muslim school environments or Muslim teachers working in schools, that in the trust that I worked for in the UK, that one of the guiding principles that senior leaders had was the principle of D Delegation. And that's the principle, and that really relates to the idea of servant leadership. And so one of the things that we would say as senior leaders in this trust in the UK is that it actually, most people end up being able to delegate fine. It's pretty easy to delegate. You know, we've got 10 tasks, I've got power, I've got authority, I'm asking you to do X, Y, Z. But what as senior leaders we found was of greater value was the principle of D Delegation. And that's where you're checking in all the time with your colleagues as a servant leader to see where can I support? Where do you need support? What can I take off you because you're struggling? And you know, what's the support that we need to help you to achieve that? And so one of the principles that we had is that as senior leaders, then it's really important that colleagues in the organization look to you and see the level of work and commitment that you're putting into the school, because they will reflect that. And I think that's a really important Islamic principle. If you think about, you know, many of the hadith, you know, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, many examples of servant leadership, and so that was a really important principle. The idea of as leaders we're serving our communities. We're not just serving our school communities from parents, keeping parents happy. We're serving our student community. We're serving our staff community. Our role is to facilitate their effective. Our role as leaders is to facilitate the work of staff, to facilitate the experience of students, to facilitate the satisfaction of parents. You know, so that's how I view leadership, that we are there as servants to our community. And there's nothing I find less inspiring than a leader who delegates everything, and then you're not convinced that they're working hard themselves. And I think many of us might have had experiences or examples of that, where we feel, or we've seen delegation, but where is the example being set by the leader? So while all the things that we've explored this evening, I think are really valid and important, that I would just say that as a slight little health warning, that we never want to be the kind of leader that delegates everything and then sits back and relaxes and watches all the work take place.
Yeah, no, I think you've made some very valid points then, some points for all of us to sort of think back to, the essence of why we have become teachers, and that's to obviously impart knowledge, but also serve our communities and, be there. And in essence, that's what schools are there. They're there to serve communities and help people through making progress in their life to become better. And I think it's D Delegation, did you say? The
Yeah, D Delegation. The idea of finding what colleagues are struggling with and taking it off them and supporting them with it.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for that.
Well, yeah.
All right. So thank you very much, everyone. That's been a very delightful last 3 weeks to have spent this time with all of you. I'm getting some nice comments from everyone. Thank you, Brother Ihsan. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind everyone, you'll be hearing from our administrator, Sister Zainab Salim, who will be sending you all the YouTube videos for the last 3 sessions, including this, as well as the PowerPoints, as well as the resources that we promised you from the difficult conversation session. And I'll be very grateful, as well as all the participants, as well as all the co-hosts, if you could kindly please fill out the feedback form, which would enable us to understand exactly what we can do to improve these sessions again in the future, because feedback is essentially going to help us to become better. And that's what we do for our students, and we too need to do that for our colleagues too. So on that basis, I'd like to say Jazakallah khair to everyone. I hope you have a restful evening and enjoy the last few weeks of the school term. And inshallah, you're ready to go in September. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.